Noah had always been the calm, analytical type, the kind of person who believed there was a logical explanation for everything. When he received his acceptance letter to medical school, his family couldn't have been prouder. They planned a road trip to drop him off at his new dormitory, eager to help him settle, and his parents, always supportive, and his older sister, Emma, were excited to be a part of this new chapter in his life. The drive began with the usual chatter and laughter. They passed through towns and open fields, the scenery gradually changing as they neared the vast, ancient forest that surrounded the university. The sky grew darker as they entered the dense woods, the trees towering above them, blocking out the sun. Noah's father drove carefully along the winding road, his mother occasionally pointing out landmarks from the map. Emma, sitting in the back seat with Noah, snapped pictures of the scenery, oblivious to the growing tension in the car. Noah felt at first a sense of unease that gnawed at the edges of his mind. The forest felt different, almost alive, as if it were watching them. He shook off the feeling, chalking it up to nerves. But as they delved deeper into the woods, the atmosphere in the car grew heavy. Suddenly, the car lurched to a stop. Noah's father cursed under his breath and tried to restart the engine, but it wouldn't respond. The lights flickered, and the radio emitted a high-pitched whine before going silent. They were stranded in the middle of the forest with no signal on their phones and no other cars in sight. "What now?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with nervousness. Before anyone could respond, a thick fog began to roll in, enveloping the car in a cold, white mist. Visibility dropped to almost nothing, and the eerie silence was only broken by the sound of their breathing. Noah's father tried the engine again, and this time it sputtered to life. Relieved, they started moving forward slowly, the headlights barely cutting through the fog. But as they drove, something strange began to happen. The fog seemed to close in on them, pressing against the windows, distorting their surroundings. Shapes moved in the mist, fleeting shadows that disappeared as soon as they were noticed. The road ahead seemed to twist and turn in impossible ways, leading them deeper into the forest instead of out of it. Then, without warning, Noah saw something that made his blood run cold. A figure stood in the middle of the road, barely visible through the fog. It was a man, his clothes tattered and soaked in blood. As the car drew closer, Noah saw that the man's eyes were wide with terror, his mouth open in a silent scream. His father swerved to avoid the figure, but the car skidded on the slick road and came to a halt. Noah's mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, but when they looked back, the man was gone. "What the hell was that?" Noah's father whispered, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. Before anyone could answer, the fog thickened even more, and the temperature inside the car dropped. The air felt heavy, oppressive, as if something malevolent were pressing down on them. Then, the unthinkable happened. The doors of the car flew open on their own, and the family was forcibly pulled out, each one thrown into the fog in different directions. Noah tried to scream, tried to hold on to his sister's hand, but she was ripped away from him, her terrified scream echoing through the mist. Noah hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of him. When he scrambled to his feet, he realized he was alone, surrounded by nothing but thick, swirling fog. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint sound of footsteps approaching from somewhere unseen. Panic surged through Noah as he stumbled forward, calling out for his family. But instead of his family's voices, he heard something else, soft whispers that seemed to come from all around him. The voices were distorted, almost inhuman, speaking in a language he couldn't understand. Noah's heart raced as he pushed through the fog, desperate to find his family. But then the whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the fog began to clear just enough for him to see something that made his blood run cold. There, just a few feet away, was his father. He was kneeling on the ground, his face contorted in pain, with deep, jagged wounds carved into his chest. Blood pooled around him, soaking into the earth. Noah's breath caught in his throat as he watched his father collapse, his lifeless eyes staring blankly at the sky. "No!" Noah screamed, rushing forward. But as he reached his father, the body dissolved into mist, leaving nothing but cold air in its wake. Before he could react, Noah heard another sound, a choked sob coming from somewhere nearby. He turned and saw his mother, her body crumpled at the base of a tree, her neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood dripped from her mouth as she gasped for breath, her eyes pleading for help. "Noah," she whispered, her voice weak and full of pain. But before he could reach her, Cheetah vanished into the mist, leaving Noah alone once more. Terror consumed him as he staggered through the forest, the fog parting just enough to reveal more gruesome sights. His sister, Emma, was the next to appear, her body hanging limply from a branch, her eyes wide open in death. Noah fell to his knees, his mind reeling from the horror of it all. But the nightmare wasn't over yet. The fog thickened once more, and Noah heard footsteps behind him. He turned, expecting to see another horrific vision, but instead he saw Jake, his best friend since childhood. Jake was walking toward him, a cruel smile on his face, holding a blooded knife in his hand. "Noah, you should have never come here," Jake said, his voice cold and empty. Before Noah could react, Jake lunged at him, plunging the knife deep into his chest. Pain exploded through Noah's body as he fell backward, gasping for breath. The world around him began to fade, the fog closing in, suffocating him. But then, just as quickly as it had begun, the nightmare ended. Noah jolted awake, his heart pounding in his chest. He was back in the car, his family around him, all of them silent and wide-eyed with fear. The fog had cleared, and they were driving out of the forest, the trees thinning as they approached the university. No one spoke as they pulled up to the dormitory. Noah's parents tried to comfort him, but the terror of what they had just experienced hung heavily in the air. It felt too real to be a dream, too vivid to be a mere trick of the mind. Later that night, as Noah lay in his dorm bed, the images of his family's brutal deaths replayed over and over in his mind. The horror of it all consumed him, filling him with a sense of dread that refused to fade. As he stared at the ceiling, sleep eluding him, Noah's thoughts drifted to the students who had gone missing a year ago: Sarah, Jack, Emily, Alex, and Ron. Could there be a connection between their disappearance and the terrifying events he and his family had just experienced? The question gnawed at him, filling him with a fear he couldn't shake. Noah knew one thing for certain: whatever dark forces were at play, they weren't finished with him yet.